Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and respond to pyrrho's video about the gap between rich and poor. And before anyone asks, yes, I did cut my hair. Anyway, I was kind of hesitant to respond to this video for a while because I know I'd be reiterating myself a lot. Because this issue is kind of my bread and butter. It's an issue I've spoken on repeatedly, and it's kind of got to say what I've said a million times in sort of a new and novel way. But here goes. I'll start with what Pyrrho mentioned about making money undesirable to hold on to. Now he mentioned how inflation is kind of built into the current system, and how but that has problems with it as well. One system that I've been studying well is the system that was set up by Silvio Gesell. And for him, instead of inflation, he advocates something called demurrage, which is actually attaching a cost to holding on to money. It works differently in inflation because each new dollar that goes into existence is worth the same as the last dollar that goes into existence. So the money itself doesn't devalue. So like the money system doesn't devalue over time, but the individual individual banknotes and things like that devalue over time. What Cassell had advocated would be that dollars would have a place where you place a stamp every week or every month, and the stamp would cost like a certain percentage of the dollar amount, like 1 cent or 2 cents or something like that. So basically, you'd be paying a charge on holding on to the money, and so it's better to give that money to someone else to so they'd have to pay that charge, and so it's kind of like a hot potato, and money circulates a lot more rapidly. Now that sounds to me a bit inconvenient, although inconvenience is in a sense the point of it. What he's saying is that money should be inconvenient to hold on to, because what it's really meant to do is to facilitate the transaction of goods. And if you prefer the holding of money to the holding of goods, then it's not really doing its job. The thing is, I think there might be better ways of doing that. And for one thing, doing it on the banking side, because most people don't hold a lot of cash in their wallet anyway. It's usually money in the bank that they hold on to, and so and often banks will hold on to reserves that not lend them out when the economy is kind of in a crunch, and so I think so. What I was thinking is like banks will have an inactivity charge sometimes for when someone doesn't move their money. I was thinking the government could actually implement a inactivity charge on banks, like tax them for idle money, so that they have to give out loans. Of course, there's a danger to that, which is what are they what they're loaning about? What are their loans? What are they? What kind of loans are they creating? Are they creating mortgage loans? Are they creating small business loans? So with that, so obviously just getting them to loan isn't necessary enough. We have to oversee what kind of loans they're doing. But anyway, yeah, I haven't quite figured all the details of that out, but yeah, I do agree with the idea of having a cost to holding on to money. Now, I think another thing we need to look at is how is money being spent, and how are people earning money. Now, I think here we have to look into speculation versus profit versus production. See, yeah, I remember here in the last Stickum session, you mentioned the value-added tax, and I talked about my opposition to the value-added tax, and I don't think I got enough into why I oppose it. I will make myself clearer, I think, when I mentioned that what I favor is a value-subtracted tax. That is, I believe that we should be encouraging people to add value to the economy. We should, that production is good, and if you earn your living by producing things that enhance people's lives, then you absolutely deserve that money that you earned. The thing is, a lot of people earn their money, or quote unquote earn their money, by doing things that take money out of the economy. They're sucking the money out of the other people make out of the economy and use it to make themselves richer. We call this speculation. Obviously, that's because in certain circumstances we call it theft, but for most part, when it's legal, we call it speculation. And I talk a lot about land value taxation. That is one of the biggest areas of speculation where people, I mean, we saw it in the housing crisis where people would buy properties not for the purpose of living them, but just for the increase in value expected, and what production, what value was contributed to the economy by that? Absolutely nothing. But the thing is, that applies even to people who are using their buildings, is that often they get a surplus revenue by virtue of having their business located in a certain area versus others. So like a business that sets up shop in Manhattan is getting a lot more customers. They're doing a lot more business by virtue of location. Like the mantra of real estate is location, location, location. So, and that's what we call the unearned increment, and that's why I favor taxing the full unimproved value of land. And the main reason I focus on that specific form of rent is that when you look at land values, realize that land values comprise about 2/3 of the price of real estate. That you realize that that's a large enough tax base to get rid of all other taxes if we just tax that fully. But there are other forms of rent that we want to be taxing as well, simply to make sure that people are earning their living through production rather than through things that take from the productive class. For example, we want to be charging people for their use of the radio spectrum. The radio spectrum, you can earn rent through that by getting a special spot on that spectrum. In terms of the use of resources, we got to stop treating when we mine a mountain or cut down a forest, we've got to stop treating those resources as if they're free. You're not. If we think of cutting down a forest as adding value, when we don't count the value subtracted that we had from the ecological services that forest was doing when it was still standing. So I think we ought to, one thing we have to do is actually create a system of economically valuing those, setting a value on those things, so that we understand that, so that we can tax those activities according to the value that they subtract from the from what we get from the ecosystem in its pure state. So, in other words, by setting up a system of valuing nature, we can understand the opportunity costs of doing those things as well, and tax those activities accordingly. Have a severance tax on mining, on lumber, that would not only encourage conservation, but also it would encourage recycling and reuse of those things. So it's cheap, so it'd be cheaper to use recycled wood or recycled metals and things like that than to extract it from the earth. Yeah, another thing I think we need to do is actually reform our capital gains system or system of investment. One proposal that I liked that I saw was if you reform a capital gains tax so that you buy a stock, if you sell it within a year, you get taxed 50%. If you sell the next year, you get taxed 40%. You sell it next year, you get taxed 30%. So that 5 years out, you're not paying any capital gains tax. But what that does is it encourages people to invest long term versus speculating short term. So that rather than a bunch of bets that characterize so much of what Wall Street does today, instead we have people investing in companies and having invested interest in those companies succeeding in the long term, and I think creating more stability. So I guess finally on my list, I think we need to address the corporation and corporate law. Starting with ending corporate personhood. It amazes me the number of Ayn Rand devotees who strongly support corporations and corporate rights and stuff. When the whole idea of corporate personhood is about the most collectivist idea you can possibly come up with. And the thing is, if we end corporate personhood, because remember that corporations derive their existence from the state, they actually exist by virtue of corporate charter. Once we do that, we can set a few rules for them that would make them serve society better. For one thing, we could set a maximum wage for CEO, address CEO pay, and I'm thinking what we could do is set a 20-to-1 ratio where the CEO, where the top paid worker, which would be the CEO, would make 20 times more than the lowest paid worker, which I think currently that ratio is like 50-to-1 or 100-to-1, some crazy like that. And what an interesting side benefit is that it also in effect creates a minimum wage, but it's a minimum wage. There's a ratio, so that the lower the lowest paid worker is, the less the CEO makes. So then that creates an interesting disincentive for outsourcing, because if you're outsourcing to get cheaper labor, that also means the CEO has to lower his own pay. So he ends up just paying the workers the same, regardless if they're in America or in Borneo or whatever. And then also we have regulations about who serves on the board of directors on a corporation. Like in a lot of European countries, they have some rule that labor representatives have to comprise a certain percentage of the board of representatives. So I think we ought to do something like that, so that the board better represents the interest of all the people working there, instead of just a bunch of fat cats chomping on cigars and things like that. So there's a bit more I probably want to get into later, but I'm running out of time, so I guess that's it for now. Peace.